The Valorian Dominion had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. They were tall creatures with gray skin, 4 eyes, and arms that bent in ways that made humans uncomfortable. Their empire stretched across 3 galactic arms, and they had conquered 17 different species. Some of those species had fought back. All of them had lost. The Valorians believed they were the greatest power the universe had ever seen. They had never been wrong before. High Commander Xyrith stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and watched the blue planet spinning slowly on his viewing screen. Earth, such a small world, such a young species. The humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They had no idea what waited for them in the darkness between stars. Scan complete, his sensor officer reported. 112 billion life forms. Primitive defensive satellites. A small fleet of approximately 200 vessels. Xyrith made a sound that was the Valorian version of a laugh. 200 ships. His invasion fleet alone numbered over 4,000. The full might of the Dominion could field 50,000 warships if needed. These humans were insects waiting to be crushed. Far across the solar system, Captain Lisa Grant sat in the command chair of the research vessel Endeavour. She was 43 years old, with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too many things go wrong in space. Her ship was supposed to be studying the ice formations on Europa. That mission ended the moment her sensors detected 12 massive objects dropping out of faster-than-light travel. "Captain," Lieutenant Kevin Moore said from his station. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of nervous energy that came from never having faced real danger. "Those ships are huge. The smallest one is 3 times the size of anything we have." Lisa kept her voice calm even though her heart was beating fast. "Any response to our hails?" Communications Officer Amy Peters shook her head. She was a small woman with dark skin and steady hands. "Nothing yet. Wait. Something's coming through." The message appeared on their screens in perfect English. The aliens had clearly been monitoring Earth's broadcasts long enough to learn the language. The message was simple and cold. "People of Earth, you have been chosen for inclusion in the Valorian Dominion. You will surrender all military assets. You will accept our governance. You will serve the Empire. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. You have 30 standard cycles to comply. This is not a negotiation." Lisa read the message 3 times. Her hands were shaking now, but not from fear. She was angry. She had spent her whole life reaching for the stars, dreaming of the wonders they might find. Instead, they had found conquerors. "Send everything we have back to Earth," she ordered. "Full sensor readings, the message, all of it. They need to know what's coming." The message reached Earth in hours. Within a day, every government on the planet knew what they were facing. Within a week, old enemies became allies. The United Terran Defense Council formed in Geneva, bringing together military leaders from every nation. Admiral Christopher Blake stood at the head of the council table. He was 61 years old, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had commanded naval vessels for 40 years, and he had never lost a battle. He did not plan to start now. "We have 23 days before their deadline," he said to the assembled leaders. "They expect us to spend that time begging for mercy. We will not." General Maria Santos raised her hand. She commanded the orbital defense platforms. "Admiral, with respect, we have 200 ships. They have 4,000. Even if we fight, we lose." Blake smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "That's what they think. That's what everyone thinks. Dr. Price, would you like to explain why they're wrong?" Dr. Samantha Price stood up. She was 50 years old, with wild red hair and glasses that she was always pushing up her nose. She had spent the last 20 years leading humanity's most secret research project. In 2089, we found an alien structure buried under the ice of Europa, she began. It was old. Very old. The species that built it died out millions of years before Earth even had dinosaurs. But their technology survived. We've been studying it in secret ever since. She pressed a button and holographic images filled the air. Ships, weapons, things that looked like science fiction. We reverse-engineered their faster-than-light drive. That's how we got to the stars so quickly. But that was just the beginning. The vetting. We also figured out their weapons, their shields, their power systems. For 20 years, we've been building a secret fleet. A fleet that uses technology the Valorians have never seen. The room was silent. General Santos leaned forward. How many ships? 800 capital ships, 4,000 fighters, and one very special dreadnought. Blake took over again. The Valorians have never faced a real challenge. Every species they conquered either surrendered or fought with inferior technology. They've grown lazy, arrogant. They have no idea what a species that refuses to die is capable of. He looked around the table at the faces of men and women from every corner of Earth. Some were scared. Some were skeptical. But he could see hope in their eyes. Hope in something else. Anger. The same anger that Captain Lisa Grant had felt when she received that first message. We have 3 weeks, Blake said. 3 weeks to move our secret fleet into position. 3 weeks to train our soldiers for a battle unlike anything humanity has ever fought. 3 weeks to prepare the biggest surprise the galaxy has ever seen. He slammed his fist on the table. They came to our home and threatened our children. They called us primitive. They gave us a deadline like we were servants. Let me be clear about something. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not bow. And when the Valorians come for us, they will learn why that is a very, very dangerous mistake. In orbit above Earth, the 12 Valorian scout ships watched and waited. They saw the panic in the news broadcasts. They saw the military leaders scrambling. They reported back to High Commander Zereth that everything was going according to plan. They had no idea that deep in the shadows of Saturn's rings, 800 human warships were powering up their engines for the first time. They had no idea that humanity had been waiting for this moment for 2 decades. They had no idea that their empire was about to face something it had never encountered before. A species that was ready for them. The countdown had begun. And when it reached 0, the galaxy would change forever. Behind the rings of Saturn, hidden from every scanner in the known galaxy, the secret shipyard stretched across hundreds of kilometers of empty space. Commander Daniel Cruz floated in the observation deck of the command station, watching his life's work come alive. He was 45 years old, born in Texas, but raised among the stars. He had spent the last 15 years building this fleet in total secrecy. His crews worked in silence. His ships never sent radio signals. Every piece of metal, every wire, every weapon had been transported here under cover of darkness. And now, finally, the fleet was ready. "Commander," his aide said through the intercom, "Admiral Blake is on the secure channel." Daniel pushed himself toward the communication console. Blake's face appeared on the screen, tired but determined. "Status report," Blake said. "All 800 capital ships are operational. Weapons charged. Crews trained. We're ready." Blake nodded. "What about the Judgment?" Daniel smiled. The Judgment was his masterpiece. 3 kilometers long, powered by a miniature star trapped in a magnetic bottle, armed with weapons that could tear holes in the fabric of space itself. It was the most powerful vessel humanity had ever built. It was also completely invisible to Valorian sensors. "She's ready to fly," Daniel said. Captain Amy Lin is commanding. She's the best pilot we have. Good. Move the fleet to position 7. Stay dark until you receive my signal. Understood. What about the ground forces? Blake's expression hardened. Colonel Patricia Hayes has them ready. 20,000 orbital drop troops. Another 50,000 Marines. They've been training for this their entire careers. On Earth, Colonel Patricia Hayes stood in a massive underground bunker and watched her soldiers prepare. She was 50 years old with silver hair cut short and a scar that ran from her left ear to her chin. She had earned that scar fighting rebels on Mars 10 years ago. She would earn more scars before this war was over. Listen up, she shouted, and 10,000 soldiers stopped what they were doing to face her. In 2 weeks, we're going to drop from orbit onto alien warships. We're going to fight creatures twice our size in corridors designed for their bodies, not ours. Some of us are going to die. She paused, letting that sink in. But we're not fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone back home. Every child sleeping safely in their bed. Every family that doesn't know how close they are to losing everything. The Valorians think we're weak. They think we'll break. Let's show them what humans are made of. The soldiers roared their approval. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. They were ready. In a different bunker, one buried even deeper underground, Dr. Nathan Cole worked on the most important project in human history. He was 38 years old, thin and pale from too many years spent in laboratories instead of sunlight. But his mind was sharper than a laser, and he had figured out something that could win the war before it even started. Run the simulation again, he told his team. On the screens, a digital model of a Valorian warship appeared. Its shields glowed blue, protecting it from all harm. Then a single pulse of energy hit the ship. The shields flickered once and died. It works every time, Dr. Price said, standing beside him. The Valorians have used the same shield technology for 8,000 years. They never bothered to improve it because no one ever survived long enough to find its weakness. But we did, Nathan said. Their shields operate on a specific harmonic frequency. One pulse at the right wavelength, and every shield in their entire fleet drops at the same time. They won't even know what happened. Dr. Price put her hand on his shoulder. You've given us a chance, Nathan. A real chance. Above Earth, the Valorian scout ships continued their watch. They saw human diplomats begging for more time. They saw news reports about panic and fear. They saw exactly what they expected to see. What they did not see was the truth. They did not see the 800 warships hiding in Saturn's shadow. They did not see the soldiers training in underground bunkers. They did not see the scientists working day and night on weapons that would change everything. The Valorians saw a frightened primitive species waiting to be conquered. They could not have been more wrong. Lieutenant Rachel Kim sat in the cockpit of her fighter, running through combat simulations for the 100th time. She was 29 years old, the youngest squadron commander in the fleet. She had been flying since she was 16, and there was nothing in the galaxy that could outmaneuver her. Again, she muttered, restarting the simulation. The virtual Valorian fighters came at her in waves. She destroyed them all in under 3 minutes. You should rest, her wingman, Lieutenant Carlos Rivera, said through the radio. The real fight is coming soon. That's why I'm practicing, Rachel replied. When those aliens show up, I want to be ready. On the other side of the solar system, High Commander Zyrith reviewed his battle plans with growing boredom. The humans had sent another message begging for an extension. Pathetic. He had seen this same behavior from a dozen species before. First, they begged. Then they cried. Then they surrendered. It was always the same. Should we respond? His communications officer asked. No. Let them stew in their fear. When the deadline arrives, we will destroy the largest cities as a demonstration. The survivors will surrender within hours." He leaned back in his command chair, satisfied with his plan. In 10,000 years, the Dominion had never lost a war. There was no reason to think this time would be any different. But across the cold emptiness of space, Admiral Blake was putting the final pieces of his plan into place. The secret fleet had moved into position. The ground troops were loaded into their drop pods. The shield-killing pulse was ready to transmit. Every human soldier, pilot, and sailor knew their role. How long until their deadline? Blake asked his aide. 72 hours, sir. Blake nodded. Good. Get me Captain Grant on the Endeavor. I have a job for her. Lisa Grant had spent the last 2 weeks as a prisoner in her own solar system, forced to watch the alien ships orbit Earth like wolves circling a wounded animal. When Blake's message came through, she nearly cried with relief. "Captain," Blake's voice said, "I need you to do something crazy. I'm listening. I need you to fly directly at the Valorian fleet. Transmit a surrender message. Make them think you're giving up." Lisa understood immediately. "You want them distracted." "Exactly. When they're focused on you, we strike. Can you do it?" Lisa looked at her crew. Kevin Moore, Amy Peters, the men and women who had trusted her with their lives. They all nodded. "We can do it, Admiral. Just make sure you hit them hard." Blake's voice softened. "You'll be in danger, Captain. I won't lie to you." "I know," Lisa said. "But this is bigger than us. This is for everyone." She ended the transmission and turned to her crew. "You heard the man. Let's go make history." The countdown continued. Humanity was ready, and in less than 3 days, the Valorian Dominion would learn the true meaning of war. The deadline arrived on a Tuesday morning. High Commander Xyrath stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, surrounded by his officers, and watched the final seconds count down to 0. Behind him, 4,200 warships waited for his command. In front of him, the blue marble of Earth hung in the darkness, beautiful and fragile. "The time has come," Xyrath announced. "Target their largest population centers. Begin the demonstration." His weapons officer reached for the firing controls. Then the alarms started screaming. "Commander," the sensor officer shouted, "ships emerging from behind the gas giant." "Many ships. I count 800 capital vessels and thousands of smaller craft." Xyrath's 4 eyes went wide. "That's impossible. Our scans showed only 200 ships." "These are different, Commander. The energy signatures are nothing we've seen before." On the view screen, the human fleet appeared like ghosts materializing from thin air. They moved in perfect formation, sleek and deadly. At their center, a massive vessel dwarfed everything around it. The judgment had arrived. Captain Amy Lynn sat in the command chair of the dreadnought, calm as still water. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and hands that never trembled. She had waited her entire life for this moment. "All ships report ready," her tactical officer said. "Good. Open a channel to the Valorian flagship." Admiral Blake's voice filled the bridge, transmitted to every human ship, and broadcast directly to the alien fleet. "This is Admiral Christopher Blake of the United Terran Navy. You came to our home with threats and demands. You expected us to kneel. You were wrong. This is your one chance to withdraw. Take it or burn." Xyrath's response came seconds later, full of contempt. "You have a few hidden ships. It changes nothing. Our fleet outnumbers yours 5 to 1. Your technology is primitive. This is not a battle. This is an execution." Blake's voice hardened. "Dr. Cole, now." Deep in the command center on Earth, Nathan Cole pressed a single button. A pulse of energy, invisible to the naked eye, spread across the solar system at the speed of light. It was precisely tuned to a frequency that the Valorians had used for 8,000 years without ever questioning it. On every Valorian ship, something unexpected happened. The shields that had protected them for millennia flickered once and died. Warning lights filled every bridge. Officers shouted in confusion. For the first time in living memory, the warships of the Dominion were naked and vulnerable. Xyrus stared at his displays in shock. What happened? Get the shields back online. We can't, Commander. The generators are burned out. It will take hours to repair. Then we fight without them. All ships, open fire. But the humans were faster. Weapons free, Emilyn commanded. The Judgment fired its main weapon first. A beam of twisted space-time, darker than the void itself, lanced across the battlefield. 300 Valorian ships simply vanished, crushed into nothing by forces they could not comprehend. They did not explode. They did not burn. They just ceased to exist. Then the rest of the human fleet opened fire. Railguns accelerated metal slugs to a fraction of the speed of light. Missiles carrying warheads that burst into 1,000 smaller bombs spread destruction across the alien formation. Energy beams sliced through hulls that had never known the touch of weapons. Lieutenant Rachel Kim led her squadron into the chaos. Her fighter danced between enemy fire, faster and more agile than anything the Valorians had ever faced. Target their engine cores, she ordered her pilots. Disable, don't destroy. We want prisoners. Copy that, lead, Carlos Rivera replied, his fighter spinning to avoid a burst of plasma. They swept through the Valorian formation like wolves among sheep. Enemy fighters tried to intercept them, but the human craft were faster, more maneuverable, and piloted by people who had spent years preparing for exactly this fight. Captain Lisa Grant watched the battle from the Endeavor, positioned safely behind the main fleet. Her job as a distraction had ended the moment the fighting started. Now she could only watch and pray. My God, Kevin Moore whispered beside her. We're winning. The Valorian fleet was in chaos. Ships without shields tried to evade weapons they could not stop. Commanders who had never tasted defeat screamed orders that no one could follow. In less than 5 minutes, a quarter of their fleet was gone. All ground teams, prepare for boarding, Admiral Blake ordered. Colonel Patricia Hayes stood in her drop pod, surrounded by her best soldiers. The pod shook as it launched from its carrier, racing toward a disabled Valorian cruiser. She gripped her rifle and counted the seconds. Impact in 10 seconds, the pod's computer announced. The pod slammed through the cruiser's hull like a bullet through paper. Patricia and her team poured out into a corridor filled with smoke and screaming aliens. The Valorians were huge, but they had never fought boarders before. They had never seen humans in combat armor, moving with deadly speed through their own ships. Secure engineering, Patricia ordered. Non-lethal if possible. We need prisoners who can talk. Her soldiers spread through the ship. They used stun weapons when they could. Lethal force when they had to. The Valorians fought back, but they were engineers and technicians, not warriors. Within minutes, the ship was under human control. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated on dozens of vessels. Human Marines teleported aboard using technology the Valorians could not understand. Drop pods punched through armor like fists through glass. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia fell silent. Their crews surrendered or dead. On the Eternal Conquest, High Commander Zirith watched his empire crumble. How is this possible? He whispered. We are the Dominion. We do not lose. Commander, we need to retreat, his first officer urged. Less than half our fleet remains. Xyrith shook his head. No retreat. We will not run from primitives. The next wave of human attacks took another 500 ships. The Judgment fired again, and another 200 vessels disappeared. The Valorian formation was gone, replaced by scattered groups of ships trying desperately to survive. Patricia Hayes' voice came through Blake's communicator. "Admiral, we have the alien flagship surrounded. Their commander is still aboard. Take him alive," Blake ordered. "I want him to see what's happening." The boarding of the Eternal Conquest took exactly 4 minutes. Human soldiers swept through the massive vessel, overwhelming the defenders. When they reached the bridge, Xyrith was waiting for them, standing tall even as his world collapsed. "You will regret this," he spat at Patricia as her soldiers bound his arms. "The Dominion will send 100 fleets. 1,000. You cannot win." Patricia smiled coldly. "We just did." She had him dragged to the viewing port and forced him to watch as the last Valorian ship surrendered. The battle was over. The greatest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled was destroyed or captured. And it had taken exactly 11 minutes. Across the solar system, human soldiers cheered. On Earth, people who had spent weeks preparing for the end of their world wept with relief. In the command center, Admiral Blake allowed himself one moment of satisfaction before turning to his officers. "Send a message to the Dominion," he said. "Include footage of their fleet's destruction and their commander's capture. Tell them this was a warning. The next time will be worse." The message raced across the galaxy at faster than light speed. And when it arrived at the Valorian homeworld, the Supreme Council watched in horrified silence. The war they had expected to win in days had become something else entirely. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion faced an enemy they could not crush. And they had no idea what humanity would do next. The footage of the battle played on every screen in the Valorian capital. Citizens who had never known fear watched their greatest fleet burn. The Supreme Council, 12 ancient beings who had ruled the Dominion for centuries, sat in stunned silence as High Commander Xyrith knelt in chains before human soldiers. "This is a trick," Supreme Commander Varth declared. He was the oldest of them, with skin like cracked leather and eyes that had seen 1,000 wars. "It must be. No primitive species could defeat us. The footage is authentic," the intelligence minister replied, her voice shaking. "Our fleet is gone. 4,000 ships, destroyed or captured in less than half a rotation. Then we send more ships. We send all of them." The other council members nodded. Pride was all they had left. They would crush these humans or die trying. The second fleet assembled in record time. 8,000 warships pulled from every corner of the empire. Colonies were left defenseless. Trade routes were abandoned. The Dominion poured everything it had into this single massive force. On Earth, Admiral Blake watched the enemy fleet gathering on long-range sensors. "They're coming," he said to his command staff. "Twice as many ships as before. Should we call up the reserves?" Vice Admiral Maria Santos asked. "We still have 300 ships that didn't fight in the first battle." Blake shook his head. "No, we're going to meet them with the Judgment and 20 escort vessels. Nothing more." The room went silent. Santos stared at him. "Admiral, that's suicide." "No," Blake said. "That's a message. The Valorians need to understand that numbers don't matter anymore. They need to see that even their largest fleet can be stopped by a handful of our ships. If we meet them with everything we have, they'll think it was a close fight. They'll keep coming. But if we beat 8,000 ships with 21, they'll know the war is over." The Judgment launched 3 days later. Captain Amy Lynn stood on her bridge, surrounded by the best officers in the fleet. Behind her, 20 heavy cruisers followed in perfect formation. Ahead of them, across the vastness of interstellar space, the Valorian Armada waited. They met in orbit around a Valorian colony world called Theric Prime. It was the oldest settlement outside the homeworld, a symbol of everything the Dominion had built. The Valorians had chosen this location deliberately. They wanted to show their people that the Empire could still protect them. 8,000 ships surrounded the tiny human fleet. The Valorian commander, Admiral Corvin, opened a communication channel. "You are brave," he admitted, "but you are fools. Your tricks will not work twice. We have modified our shields. Your pulse weapon will not save you." Amy Lynn smiled. "Who said we were going to use the same trick?" "Dr. Cole," she said over the internal channel. "Activate the cascade." In the weapons bay of the Judgment, a new device hummed to life. Dr. Nathan Cole had spent the week since the first battle working on something even more devastating than his shield killer. He called it the Cascade, and it targeted something the Valorians valued even more than their shields: their ability to run. A wave of energy spread across the Valorian fleet. On every ship, the faster-than-light drive suddenly overloaded and burned out. The engines that allowed them to cross the galaxy in days became useless scrap. 8,000 warships were suddenly stranded, trapped in a single star system with no way to escape. Corvin stared at his displays in horror. "What did you do?" "We gave you a choice," Amy Lynn replied. "Surrender now, and your crews will be treated fairly. Fight, and you will die. There is no third option. There is no escape. We will never surrender to primitives." Amy Lynn sighed. She had hoped it would not come to this. "Then I'm sorry for what happens next." The Judgment opened fire. The human dreadnought was designed for exactly this kind of battle. Its weapons were not meant for fair fights. They were meant for annihilation. Beams of twisted space carved through Valorian formations. Missiles that could not be stopped spread destruction across the entire fleet. The escort cruisers added their own firepower, targeting any ship that tried to fight back. Lieutenant Rachel Kim led her fighter squadron through the chaos. Her pilots had launched from the Judgment the moment the battle began, and now they swept through the disabled fleet like birds of prey. "Focus on the command ships," she ordered. "Take out their leadership." Carlos Rivera's fighters screamed past a Valorian battleship, dropping bombs that tore through its armor. "These people really don't learn, do they?" "They're learning now," Rachel replied. "The hard way." Colonel Patricia Hayes and her boarding teams teleported onto key vessels throughout the fleet. The Valorians were better prepared this time. They had actual soldiers waiting. But human combat training was decades ahead of anything the Dominion had faced, and the aliens fell one by one. Patricia personally led the assault on Admiral Corvin's flagship. She fought her way through corridors filled with enemy troops, her rifle cutting down anyone who stood in her way. When she reached the bridge, Corvin was waiting with a weapon in his hand. "You will not take me alive," he snarled. Patricia shot the weapon out of his grip. "Yes, I will." Her soldiers swarmed the bridge and bound the Admiral's arms. Corvin struggled, but it was useless. His ship was captured. His fleet was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. On the Judgment, Amy Lynn watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. 6,000 Valorian ships had already surrendered, their crews beaming distress signals and begging for mercy. The remaining 2,000 were either destroyed or in the process of being captured. "Admiral Blake," she reported over the quantum link, "the battle is over. Total victory." Back on Earth, Blake closed his eyes and let out a long breath. "Casualties?" 14 wounded. "No deaths. 14 wounded versus 8,000 enemy ships." Blake shook his head in disbelief. "The Dominion won't recover from this." "What do we do with the prisoners, sir?" Blake thought about it. The Valorians had come to enslave humanity. They had threatened to destroy cities, to murder billions. Part of him wanted revenge, but he knew that path led nowhere good. Treat them with dignity, he said. Give them food, medical care, and fair treatment. We're not conquerors. We're something better. Amy Lynn nodded. Understood, sir. The cleanup took days. Human ships moved through the battlefield, rescuing survivors and securing captured vessels. Engineers worked to disable the Valorian weapon systems permanently. Medical teams treated wounded aliens who had never expected mercy from their enemies. I, Commander Zereth, still a prisoner on Earth, watched the footage of the second battle in his cell. His 4 eyes stared at the screen as his entire worldview collapsed. How? He whispered. How did you do this? Admiral Blake stood outside his cell, arms crossed. We spent 20 years preparing for a war we hoped would never come. We studied technology that was ancient before your empire was born. And we fought with everything we had because we had everything to lose. Zyreth shook his head. The Dominion will not accept this. There will be more fleets. No, Blake said. There won't be. Your empire is already receiving our message. They know what happened here. They know we can do it again. The war that was supposed to last centuries is over in 3 days. Now comes the hard part. What hard part? Blake met his eyes. Building something better than what came before. The message to the Valorian homeworld was simple. The war was over. Humanity sought no conquest, no revenge. They offered peace and partnership to any species willing to accept it. The Dominion could join this new order or fade into irrelevance. On Theric Prime, the local population watched human ships delivering medical supplies instead of weapons. They saw their captors treating prisoners with kindness. They witnessed something their empire had never shown them: mercy. And across the galaxy, 17 enslaved species began to hope for the first time in 10,000 years. 1 month after the war ended, Admiral Christopher Blake stood before the largest gathering of alien species in galactic history. The Galactic Assembly had been the Valorians' tool for controlling their conquered subjects. Now it was something else entirely. Representatives from 17 different species filled the massive chamber. Beings of every shape and size imaginable. Some had scales. Some had tentacles. Some were made of crystal. All of them were watching the human who had changed everything. Blake wore his dress uniform, every medal he had ever earned shining on his chest. Behind him stood Dr. Samantha Price, Commander Daniel Cruz, and Captain Lisa Grant. They represented the science, military, and spirit that had won the war. We did not come here to conquer, Blake began, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. The Valorian Dominion made that mistake. For 10,000 years, they ruled through fear. They took what they wanted and crushed anyone who resisted. We could do the same. We have the weapons. We have the ships. We have the power to make the entire galaxy bow to humanity. He paused, letting those words sink in. But we won't, because we know where that path leads. We've seen it in our own history. Empire after empire rose on Earth, built on conquest and slavery. Every single one of them fell. Power gained through fear is power that never lasts. On the view screen behind him, images appeared. Human ships delivering food to starving colonies. Human doctors treating sick aliens who had never received proper medical care. Human engineers rebuilding infrastructure that the Dominion had let crumble for centuries. We offer something different, Blake continued. Partnership. Knowledge shared freely. Technology developed together. A galaxy where strength is used to protect, not oppress. A crystalline being rose from its seat. The Vorath had been the first species conquered by the Dominion, enslaved for longer than any other. Their ambassador moved toward the podium, light reflecting through its transparent body in patterns that looked almost like tears. Why? It asked, his voice like wind through glass. You have the power to take everything. You could demand tribute. You could force us to serve you. Why give your gifts away? Blake thought about his answer carefully. He thought about Earth's history, about the wars that had nearly destroyed humanity before they reached the stars, about the lessons written in the blood of billions. Because power without purpose is just another form of tyranny, he said. We nearly destroyed ourselves learning that lesson. Our world was almost burned by our own weapons before we came together. We'd rather not watch the galaxy make the same mistake. The Vorath ambassador studied him for a long moment. Then it did something no one expected. It bowed, a formal gesture of respect that its species had not shown to anyone in 10,000 years. The Vorath accept your offer, it said. We will stand with humanity. One by one, other ambassadors rose to speak. The Kethrani, insectoid beings who had been used as soldiers by the Dominion. The Myro, aquatic creatures whose oceanic worlds had been stripped of resources. The Tendori, peaceful traders who had been forced to become slaves. Each one had reasons to hate the galaxy and everyone in it. Each one chose hope instead. In the observation deck above the assembly floor, Captain Lisa Grant watched with Kevin Moore and Amy Peters beside her. They had been the first to encounter the Valorians. They had been the ones who sent the warning that started everything. Do you think it'll work? Amy asked quietly. Lasting peace, I mean. All these different species actually working together. Lisa watched as the votes continued below. 15 species had already joined the new coalition. The 16th was speaking now. We ended a war in 3 days that should have taken 100 years, she said. I'd say we're pretty good at doing the impossible. Kevin laughed softly. When you put it that way, building a peaceful galaxy sounds almost easy. Not easy, Lisa corrected. Just worth trying. Below them, the final vote was cast. All 17 species, including the remnants of the Valorian Dominion itself, agreed to join the new Galactic Coalition. Admiral Blake shook hands with the Vorath ambassador. Commander Cruz embraced the Kethrani representative. Dr. Price began discussing technology exchanges with the Myral scientists. On Earth, billions watched the ceremony on their screens. Children who had spent weeks terrified of alien invasion saw their planet's representatives building something new. Parents who had prepared for the end of the world instead witnessed its transformation. The fear that had gripped humanity for a month melted away, replaced by wonder. High Commander Zyrith watched from his cell. He was no longer in chains, but he remained a prisoner until his people's government could negotiate his return. He had expected humanity to execute him. Instead, they had given him comfortable quarters, good food, and access to news feeds so he could see what was happening. I don't understand, he said to the guard who brought his meals. You won. You have every right to destroy us. Why show mercy? The guard, a young woman named Sophia Cruz, Daniel's daughter, considered the question. Because destroying you wouldn't bring back the people you threatened. It wouldn't undo the fear you caused. It would just create more pain. And we've had enough pain to last forever. Zyrith stared at her for a long time. You truly believe that? We all do, Sophia said. That's what makes us human. The months that followed were not easy. Building trust between species that had been enemies for millennia took time. There were setbacks. There were arguments. There were moments when it seemed like the whole coalition might fall apart. But humanity had a gift for solving impossible problems. Dr. Nathan Cole developed new technologies that could be shared safely with any species. Colonel Patricia Hayes trained alien soldiers to work alongside human forces. Lieutenant Rachel Kim led the first mixed-species fighter squadron. Captain Amy Lin commanded the first human-Valorian joint patrol mission. And slowly, system by system, the galaxy changed. Trade routes that had been controlled by force became open to everyone. Worlds that had been stripped of resources began to heal. Species that had been crushed under the Dominion's heel learned to stand on their own again. 1 year after the war, Admiral Blake gave his final address before retiring. He stood on the bridge of the Judgment, surrounded by officers from a dozen different species. "When I was young," he said, "I dreamed of exploring the stars. I wanted to find wonders beyond imagination. Instead, I found an empire of fear and a galaxy full of suffering. But we changed that. Not through conquest, not through destruction, through courage and compassion." He looked around at the faces watching him, human and alien alike. The Valorians expected a long war. They thought they would grind us down over centuries. They were wrong. We ended their threat in 3 days. But the real victory wasn't the battles we won. It was what we built afterward. He touched the symbol on his chest, a new emblem that combined elements from every species in the coalition. This is humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons, not power, hope. The hope that things can be better. The hope that enemies can become friends. The hope that the universe doesn't have to be cruel. He saluted the assembled officers. "Carry that hope with you. Share it with everyone you meet. Because as long as that hope survives, no empire can ever truly win." The officers returned his salute, a gesture that had become universal across the coalition. Blake stepped down from the podium and walked toward the exit. His war was over, but the piece he had built would last forever. Outside the viewport, the stars burned bright against the infinite darkness. Somewhere out there, new species waited to be discovered. New wonders waited to be found. And humanity would face them not as conquerors, but as partners in the greatest adventure the universe had ever known. The galaxy had expected a long war. Humanity had given it something better. A future.